Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting of the WA Planning Commission this afternoon to determine a portion of Perth Park. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed and will be available through the Commission's website or YouTube. I'd like to welcome all of you who are attending in person today, either as deputies or as attendees, and I'd also like to welcome those who are viewing the meeting online. In opening the meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk Nation and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd like to acknowledge Mayor Karen Vernon and representatives from the town of Victoria Park, and also welcome to all residents, interested parties, deputies and the applicant and consultant team here today. Just in terms of some housekeeping, the emergency exit is just to the left as you exit this room, where you'll find a stairwell to the ground floor. And the assembly area, in case of emergency, is in Forest Place. Toilets are located to the opposite side of the lifts. In opening today's meeting, I do wish to make a brief statement because it is important at the outset of the meeting that we clarify the scope of what the Commission is dealing with today. The application before us relates to a portion of the broader Perth Park proposal. This portion of the proposal requires a decision of the WA Planning Commission under Part 10 of the Metropolitan Region Scheme and is located on land reserved regional open space. The balance of the project has been considered under separate legislation, which is not the role of the WAPC, and works on that greater portion of Perth Park have commenced. Today, the WAPC will determine the following works to the value of approximately $20 million, a portion of the multi-use racetrack, earthworks and drainage works, landscaping and public realm improvements, and roadworks and utilities upgrades. The Commission must give consideration to the purpose and aims of the Metropolitan Region Scheme and other matters set out under Clause 43 of the Region Scheme and the need to ensure orderly and proper planning. As with any application before the Commission, the Board does have the ability to approve the application with or without conditions, to defer the determination where the Commission finds that they do not have the sufficient information to make a decision, or to refuse the application. I wish to advise observers that members will refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them and in making their deliberations. In conducting this meeting, the Commission does want to recognise the high level of public interest on this proposal, and as a result, specific steps have been taken. All deputation requests made to the Commission have been accommodated. Arrangements have been made for a larger meeting room to our normal boardroom, where we've been able to accommodate all requests for in-person attendance. And as always, our meetings are live streamed and recorded to ensure that the meeting has as broad an audience as possible. I'd like to thank you all, the attendees, for engagement on this matter and for your participation in public consultation. Moving to apologies and leave of absence. Today we do have Commissioner Bennett as an apology, Commissioner Herron as an apology, and Commissioner Lakey as a late apology due to illness. All other members are in person here today. In relation to disclosures of interest on this item, the development application portion of Perth Park, Commissioner Herron has declared an indirect pecuniary interest in that he's a resident of Burswood, however not within the immediate area, and also that their former employer Urbis has provided landscape architecture services. However, this engagement was post his departure. The indirect pecuniary interest exists because Commissioner Herron has been engaged as a sub-consultant by Urbis for Karratha City Centre PSP, and due to this interest, Commissioner Herron is not attending the meeting today. Commissioner Adair, Commissioner Sandry and Commissioner Hall have all declared a perceived impartiality interest on the basis that they are employees of the City of Bayswater, and the City of Bayswater has made a submission on this item. Worth noting that that was not a submission in opposition to the application. Commissioner Adair, Commissioner Sandry and Commissioner Hall have also declared that they were not involved in the submission made by the City. Members, are there any other disclosures of interest? Thank you very much. Moving to disclosures of representation, I would like to disclose as the chairperson of the WAPC that I have had 2 preliminary briefings convened by the Office of Major Transport Infrastructure Delivery on the Perth Park proposal, which I attended in the normal course of my duties as chairperson of the WAPC. I have not been provided with any additional information that has not been provided to other board members. I have also received correspondence from the O'Neill Thompson MLC on behalf of the Liberal Opposition Party in Western Australia opposing the Perth Park project in the normal course of my duties as chairperson of the WAPC. I have shared this correspondence with WAPC members and have not been provided with any additional information that has not been made available to my colleagues. Are there any other disclosures of representation? Thank you very much. And declaration of due consideration. Could all members please indicate that they have received and considered the agenda ahead of today's meeting? Thank you very much all. So we will move to deputations and presentations, and today we do have a range of verbal presentations, and we will start by moving to Save Burswood Park Alliance and move through those, and also note that we have received written deputations which have been included in the agenda report. I will hand over to Jonathan Mesnard to take us through the deputations. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to welcome everyone who is present in order to make a deputation today, noting that on this occasion all deputations will be made in person. You will be invited to join the table just at the front here to deliver your deputation. You have been advised of the allocated time, which will be managed by a timer, which will be on the screen. If you do have a PowerPoint presentation, this will be displayed on the screen throughout, and you are requested to advise as you wish to advance the slides. For our first deputation, we have Dr. Robin Harvey of the Save Burswood Park Alliance. Please come forward.
Can I just ask how I indicate the slides to be advanced?
Would you say next, please?
Next. I've got a video that I'm going to show it. That's fine.
Yes, when you're ready.
Next. Our group urge you to refuse this development application. It is not about a bit of road widening, changes to verge layout and the decommissioning of a road. It is about giving final approval for the construction of a permanent motor racing track and associated infrastructure. This is confirmed by the words of Daniel Pastorelli to our community. He said to us, "Get over it, the racetrack is non-negotiable. There is no project without a racetrack." It is clear from the number of conditions placed on the proposed development by your planning officers that there is a significant lack of detail and certainty and poor adherence to the planning requirements. Next, please. We contend that the planned project does not adhere to Burswood District Structure Plan. You can see from the plan displayed that the statement that Lot 2002 is designated as sports and entertainment hub is incorrect. The sports precinct is restricted to the Opera Stadium precinct, and an entertainment precinct is associated with Crown Casino. Next, please. The proponents of this plan also contend that it's compatible with the Burswood Master Plan. We ask which part of this plan identified a racetrack. It does not identify new streets, widened routes, or another large drinking venue. Given the requirements of motor racing, the opportunity for the planned off-urban forest will be lost. The contention in the DA that more trees, shrubs and ground cover will be planted can hold no weight when space and safety requirements for a racetrack are considered. Next, please. I want to show just a little bit of the destruction that occurred at lightning speed. And I've just included a photo of Wanneroo Raceway so you can sort of see the landscaping. Next, please. This is a video just to give you an impression of what's already occurred. This government and this project are assuming this will go ahead. You're just a tick box exercise. Next, please. The only that's what I'm trying to say. Next. The only map in the DA is an early concept design, which is labelled subject to change. No scale, no indications where anything will be placed, no indications that modified roads are bus layovers, and no indication of how traffic will be managed. We submit that none of the plans that say they will be developed for noise, environmental and health, they should have already been done and released publicly. Next, please. You have to go faster, I'm going to run out of time. Here's an image of the supercar event at Adelaide. Have a look. Where do you think the urban forest is going? Next, please. I've just included this with a circle around it. The word events appears. We want to know what events. They haven't been disclosed. We thought only one supercar track, but that's not what it looks like. Next, please. We dispute the consultation figures. Our analysis of the online submissions were that 85% of respondents were against the racetrack, which includes the widening of Camfield Drive, and 98% were against in the drop-in sessions. Next, please. Can you just keep going? I'm trying to save time. While the opposition at Town of Victoria Parker noted in this DA, the other two councils that oppose, City of Perth and South Perth, are not mentioned in the DA. They are concerned about reducing the viability of all the outdoor events, noise, loss of amenity. And the last slide, please. We're aware of the DA states that swathes of wax have been consulted. We've never seen any evidence. And the chair of the
I'm not sure if you want to play the video. Or
not yet. Oh, sorry. Can we hold the video? It's only 15 seconds, the video. The immediate past chair of the Wadjuk Aboriginal Corporation has told us they were not consulted and no local Indigenous elders have been included in any reference group. We'd like to see evidence of those approvals before it's approved. Now, I'd like you to just leave you with the words of Auntie Glenys. It's only 15 seconds. It's got.
Just bear with us. I can say that our audio slides.
Shall I just tell you what she says?
Are we going to have any success in running the video, or should we ask Robin to outline?
It would be really good to hear her words.
Can you give me a So that's just we're not in our meeting, so you don't know how hard it was to get this. I understand that. You can appreciate the same vision and you want to speak.
So this is Auntie Glenys Yarran. She is a local Indigenous elder living in Bursman Park. What she's saying in this very short video, which is part of a much longer one, is that her parents, her father and her grandmother were both born in this area, on this land. It is really precious to them. And she then says, at the end, I don't want a racetrack here. We believe she represents the view of the local Indigenous elders, and they feel very dislocated about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Before you go, I will just see whether there are any questions for you from members. Members, do you wish to ask Robin any questions? Thank you very much for your deputy.
I must say it's very hard to condense into such short.
Well, we did provide additional time for that reason.
Yes, thank you.
For our next deputation, we do have Amanda Morecambe. If you please come forwards. So when you're ready, please.
The natural environment of the Swan Canning River Park is fundamental to the health and well-being of the Perth community. It provides connection to nature, recreation and sport, and supports both mental and physical well-being. It is also central to the economic value of Western Australia, attracting visitors who come to experience our landscapes and wildlife. The Swan River Protection Strategy 2015 recognises this by identifying ecosystem health as the primary value underpinning all others, including water quality, biodiversity and foreshore condition. My concern
relates to the proposed motorsports development at Burswood due to its proximity to the Swan River Derbil Yerrigan and the cumulative impacting pressures this development would introduce. The river park supports diverse wildlife, including a small, vulnerable, near-threatened population of Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins. These are resident dolphins born and raised in the river park and dependent on it as their home habitat. They are ecologically significant, culturally important and highly valued by the community, as well as contributing to nature-based tourism and the wider state economy. Dolphins are protected under two pieces of legislation, by the Environment Protection and Biodiversity and Conservation Act 1999 and Biodiversity Conservation Act 2016. Research from Curtin Murdoch and Edith Cowan universities show calf survival rates in this system are significantly lower than in less urbanised areas, coinciding with increased human activity pressures. The population already faces multiple stresses, including disease and entanglement in fishing line and plastics, both significant causes of mortality. In addition, reduced water quality, declining habitat condition and underwater noise from boats and other river activities and add further pressure. Chronic stress from these factors is known to weaken immune systems, increasing disease susceptibility and reducing reproductive success. The proposed Burswood motorsport development would introduce additional cumulative impacting pressures on habitat and wildlife. These include vegetation clearing, foreshore destabilisation, construction disturbance and sediment runoff, and noise pollution, both underwater and in the air, affecting dolphins and bird life. Further pressures include fuel, oil and chemical contamination, tyre particles, heavy metals and pollutants entering the river through stormwater. Waste and wastewater from events, along with contaminants reaching groundwater, further add to this load. These pollutants accumulate through food chain, affecting marine life and posing risks to people, including recreational fishers. These pressures also accumulate over time and contribute to ongoing ecosystem degradation. International guidance reinforces these concerns. Motorsports South Africa's environmental guidance emphasises the importance of protecting water sources, avoiding damage to river banks and minimising impacts on sensitive environments by locating developments away from waterways and aquatic ecosystems.
Amanda, just noting you are running over, so if you could make your concluding
I'm finishing
comments.
now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Given that ecosystem health underpins the Swan River Protection Strategy and the importance of the environment to community wellbeing, cultural values and the economy, a development of this nature at Burswood would place unacceptable additional pressure on an already sensitive aquatic ecosystem.
Amanda, thank you for your deputation. I will now see if there are any questions for you. Members, do you have any questions? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Amanda. For our next deputation, we have Jerry Pruitt. If you could please come forwards. Just begin when you're ready, please.
Okay. When spruiking the concept of the Burswood Park racetrack, as it was then named, Tourism Minister Rita Saffioti said, and I quote, "Imagine the noise, atmosphere and crowds as V8s fly around a new and specially designed racetrack in Burswood Park, just a stone's throw from the city. It will be incredible." Yes, Deputy Premier, we as local residents can imagine the noise, and it's not pleasant. I have very many concerns regarding the management of environmental noise for the Perth Park racetrack, both during construction phase and then in its ongoing use. Throughout the development application, there's reference to an annual sport event. It also says the event will be a 3-day event from Friday to Sunday during daylight hours. The Premier has already mentioned e-car racing and racing under floodlights. Nothing is considered in this application. We have continually been drip-fed with tweaks and changes to the plans. During the construction phase, residents were assured the work would be carried out Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. After a recent spell of wet weather, construction was carried out on Saturdays also. Residents were advised only after a written complaint was sent. The response was basically, oops, my bad. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. The widening of Camfield Drive without the capacity to introduce traffic calming measures is likely to turn it into an unofficial racetrack. Camfield Drive already is used by car clubs who race cars along it on a weekly basis, creating significant noise and danger to the community and residents. If you've ever attended the Open Air Cinema, you'll be well aware of this activity. This was observed last year when a much publicised severe accident resulted in a near death to one of the spectators. WorkSafe noise recommendations are set at 85 decibels over 8 hours, where continued exposure above this level can cause permanent hearing damage. Australia and New Zealand motorsport uses 95 decibels at 30 metres, whereas spectators can be just 2 metres from the track. The modelling on this report suggests that the noise levels will be between 80 to 85 decibels on average in the Burswood buildings. These noise levels are never measured nor policed independently. Monitoring at Newcastle within 4 metres of the track ranged from 106 to 115 decibels at most locations during the race. In addition, the WorkSafe assessment criteria uses short-term, very high waveform peak level of 140 decibels, which allows for one exceedance every 8 hours. At one location in Newcastle, there were 9 exceedances of that limit in a single minute. I'll just repeat that. 9 exceedances were recorded in a single minute. The motorsport noise management plan, residents should vacate their home or use soft foam disposable earbags. Yes, Deputy Premier, I can imagine the noise from those V8s flying around the streets of Burswood Park, and it keeps me awake at night.
Jerry, thank you very much for your deputation today. Members, do you have any questions of Jerry? Thank you.
Thank you. For our next deputation, we have Michael Thorne and Suzanne Roberts. If you please come forwards.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to the application. Suzanne and I oppose the government's proposed Perth Park project, mainly the plan to build a permanent motor racing track on Burswood Peninsula and conduct regular motor racing events, including annual V8 supercar races. Our opinion, and that of most others, this initiative is a complete affront to good planning and will have an overwhelmingly negative impact on the nearby residential communities and the environment, and result in massive opportunity costs by preventing more sympathetic and appropriate development on Burswood Peninsula. Our other concerns include the proposed amphitheatre, but given time limitations, I won't comment any further today. Objectively, it is barely conceivable that anyone would propose a permanent motor racing track on this piece of invaluable inner city parkland near the iconic Swan River. The evidence for this is that more than 2-year planning process undertaken by the government's Burswood Park Board contemplated nothing of the kind. It even rejected submissions for a cycling course, now apparently an essential component of the development. After 40 years of ad hoc development on the peninsula, bookended by the casino and Optus Stadium, the community was poised for another phase of development via the Burswood Park Board's master plan. That has now been cast aside. For what? Building a 3 kilometre, 12 to 18 metre wide hard surface racetrack for noisy racing cars in front yards of thousands of residents. Regardless of how often or not it's used and the conditions of that use, it cannot be in line with good urban planning objectives. In short, if approved, the V8 supercar races, this development will adversely affect the health and well-being of our Claysbrook neighbourhood, its residents, wildlife and pets, due to the continuous and excessive noise and pollution. The government has repeatedly presented the racetrack as non-negotiable, making it almost impossible to sensibly critique the development. The project is at odds with the Perth and Peel at $3.5 million plan and the Burswood Peninsula District Structure Plan, which envisages up to an additional 15,000 people living in the area. And as the Sime Marmion report shows, this is potentially at the cost to government of hundreds of millions of dollars. The government has not undertaken a benefit cost analysis. The project's published business case is best described as dodgy. There was no consideration of opportunity costs, and given the record of V8 supercar events around the country, its long-term sustainability is questionable. Ultimately, we say that motor racing, whose noise cannot be contained and mitigated, is incompatible with the planning objectives for Burswood Peninsula, and the Commission should firstly refuse the application to build a permanent racetrack on this site, and secondly not allow the conduct of motor racing here on the banks of the Swan River. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael and Suzanne, for being here today and for your deputation. Members, do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Our next deputation will be from John Syme. If you could please come forwards.
Usually on this side of the table, but this is an important project, I think. So I think
Well, John, you know how to keep to time and how important the running efficient meeting is.
that's right. I'll get through it. I won't go through the stuff that I've sent, and I know that you will have read it and can recite it back to me. And I recognise Perth Park is a big project. And what we're dealing with here is not the park project itself, but really the use of it and the use and how you might provide conditions on that, which have been proposed by the department. And I also note that Perth Park as a facility, and particularly as motorsports thing, is not actually a core use, if you like. If it was housing or if it's industrial or energy infrastructure, that's things that are important, that the community regards as important, and you can usually just provide a fair bit of discretion on that. This is an optional use. It's a discretionary use. It's a bit of a frivolous use, really, and as a land use. And I think your criteria and the bar that you set should be correspondingly very high. It really needs to be worthwhile before you start to bend planning rules, as it were. The project claims a net benefit of $61 million, but this is probably a best case. I've done a lot of these business cases, and the data that it relies on you might politely provide as variable. It merely represents additional marginal expenditure into the economy, and the motorsports component of that will be properly, if it's done properly, I'm sure it's been done well, is simply the new expenditure going into the economy by visitors coming to the state purely for this event. Now, there will be other benefits from Perth Park, and we won't go into them there. But what it means is the motorsports component is just one part of that. However, on the other side, there's very high risks, in my view, of quite substantial direct cost to government. That is real money, real cash, as a consequence of the motorsports component. This is an important and growing residential area. It's currently got 33,000 people in there, and if we can run backwards on our slides, that one, that's the one. No, not that one. Back, that one. Thank you. 33,000 people. These are the WA to Myra WAPC figures, the latest ones, which are 2025, so they're fairly recent. Commission expects this to grow to up to 49,000 by 2036. That's an additional 16,000 people. That's a lot. That's about as big as an outer suburb. It's a scale of an Averley or an Ellenbrook or something like that in terms of population. The proposition is, why would you put a racetrack in the middle of that? Why would you? It doesn't make any planning sense. It doesn't make any economic sense. Now, residents of East Perth and Burswood are well used to, we're running over. We're used to the noise nuisance from motor racing is qualitatively different. It's loud, it's persistent, it's intrusive, it's impossible to manage effectively. Its negative impact carries well beyond the decibel readings on acoustic maps. Can I get the next slide up, please? The ripple effect of this is more urban sprawl. You have reduced livability in East Perth, in Burswood. Fewer people live there. The ripple effect, as we know, and I'm not telling you anything new, is more urban sprawl. That's directly contrary to the core objectives of the Commission.
John, you're 30 seconds over now, so if you could make your
So
concluding
if
statement,
I can sort of
please.
run forward, it's therefore this is very quickly the potential consequences to government are very substantial, up to 1.8 billion dollars in capital costs and an extra $40 million in annual costs is the consequence of having more development on the outskirts of the city and less in the inner, and that's possible.
John, I'm going to have to
over.
call you to time now
Okay.
because you've gone well over.
Okay. If we could just quickly go to the next slide.
No, I think what we're going to have to do is go to questions. Are there any questions for John? There aren't. John, yes, go ahead, Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, John, for your presentation. I just want to clarify, I think I heard you say at some stage that this would amend the planning rules. And I just want to clarify what you meant by that, and if you could be more specific, or if you didn't say it, that's also
I didn't
fine.
say that
think it was
we would
bending
I said it would
planning
offend the planning things. No, so my
We
suggestion
all
is
interpreted that a little bit differently.
yes,
Thank you for clarifying.
it would offend the objectives of the Commission, the core objective, and a core objective, as you know, is more inner city development. That's not being achieved. We need to make the inner areas attractive so that it is achieved. Now, if you said no motorsports or similar activity is allowed on this development, that's condition 17. It would change condition 17 on that. That's possible for you to do. It might put you at odds with other arms of government, but in my view, it would retain the integrity of the Commission because that would be a proper planning response.
Thank you, John. I think we're well aware. Did you have a question? Commissioner Sandry, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Syme, for your deputation. Just a question just in response to that. So the proposal as it is in front of us is 3 days, I think it's Friday, Saturday and Sunday during daylight hours, whereby for the remainder of the year it's proposed to be essentially parkland, which is a regional open space. Is the suggestion that the 3-day event...
Can people please be respectful? We are really wanting to conduct this in a way that everybody is heard, and it's very important that commissioners get to ask questions. Thank you.
I'm just trying to understand
Yes,
the argument being put forward. Is the suggestion that
question, yeah.
that event will avoid future development occurring?
Burswood and East Perth are used to big events. They're well managed. The noise is contained. And if there's a problem, you turn the volume down. You can't do that with a motor racing, motorsports event. And 3 days might not sound like a lot, but it's sort of it's the bridge too far. It's just gone over the scale, it seems to me. 3 days might not sound a lot, but if you're there, it's an eternity. So yes, I think that it would flavour and colour the market around the whole area. So that, now how much would it do that? We don't know, but it will be something. It's unsustainable to say it will be an advantage. It will boost the area and make it more attractive. It's going to make it less attractive in some regards there will be a consequence.
And through the chair, if I may, and you know, based on the research that you've undertaken, has there been any examples where that has occurred, for example, in Adelaide or Melbourne or Gold Coast with their sporting events?
There's a little bit, certainly around Albert Park. There is quite a lot of anecdotal evidence that is adversely affected by the Formula One results.
Okay.
So there is a little bit, yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioners, anything further? Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. For our next deputation, we have Mayor Karen Vernon and Robert Cruikshank. Please come forwards.
And just noting that the town has requested 6 minutes and has been granted additional time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I was actually going to ask you for permission rather than seek forgiveness later, noting that there has been a run over time. I noted that I put in my deputation request separately to that of the town of Victoria Park, and I see that the response from the Commission was to put us together, which Mr Cruikshank and I are very happy to work together as we do. We have agreed between us that he will speak to you first. We are trying to avoid duplication between the points that we raise. We ask for your forgiveness in advance if we accidentally traverse over matters that one another end up speaking of to some degree. But I was going to ask you, Madam Chair, if you would give us an indulgence for potentially up to an additional 1 minute if, when Mr Cruikshank finishes and I start, we end up running slightly over time. I will be probably speaking very, very fast, and I'm probably used to 5 minutes in the council chamber, not 3 minutes. And of course, as a lawyer, used to unlimited amounts of time in court to say my piece. So
All
this
right,
is
we're
really
lucky we're not
constraining
timing this part, but yes, I do agree.
Thank you.
Please commence your deputation.
All right, so I'll go to Mr Cruikshank.
On the matter of noise impacts, the DA relies upon an undated noise modelling report submitted as part of the documentation for EPA review last year. Notably, detailed design work for the project was still being undertaken at that time. Given the limited details that were available at the time, the report includes a number of statements outlining limitations and assumptions which raise concerns about the reliability of the report, its conclusions and the predicted noise levels. One such statement is that the noise modelling should be considered indicative in nature, as site-specific details are unknown at this stage. If you are to rely upon the modelled noise levels, then for context it should be understood that the maximum level of 91 dBA is significantly loud and represents a noise level that is around 7 times louder than the maximum assigned levels under the noise regulations. Additionally, the town's officers believe that the report underestimates the noise impacts for a number of reasons, with our estimation being that the noise levels would be even greater, potentially up to 15 dBA greater than the modelling suggests. The DPLH officers indicate that the noise impacts are acceptable because they occur in only 3 days of the year. However, with respect, the noise impacts are potentially so significant over the 3 days that the noise will be intolerable for surrounding properties. Condition 16 requires the submission of an amended acoustic report. My view is that deficiencies in the report need to be addressed prior to the issuing of development approval so that likely noise impacts are known and the WAPC can determine whether these noise impacts are acceptable from an amenity perspective. This is not a matter that can be left to chance for consideration post-DA approval. SAT case law is clear that planning conditions should only regulate incidental aspects of a development. In this instance, the noise matters are yet to be properly addressed, and this is fundamental to determine whether or not the development is acceptable in planning terms. It is clear that the noise impacts are currently unresolved, and the appropriate course of action would not be to approve the application subject to further assessment, but instead to have the impacts assessed and understood before approval is granted. Moving on to the recommended conditions of approval and associated advice notes, my deputation paper includes a document identifying suggested modifications. In relation to condition 17 and suggested modification 1, the word supercars should be deleted so that the limitation applies to one race car event per year of any kind, not just a supercars event. Suggested modifications 3, 4 and 5 relate to conditions 7A and advice note D. These modifications address gaps in the conditions advice notes in relation to tree retention, new tree planting and total canopy coverage. by requiring approval of a plan detailing the final numbers of existing trees to be removed and retained.
Robert, just in case it helps, I just wanted to let you know that the commissioners do have a table which has got all of your suggested modifications. So if you don't need to perhaps read out each, but if you just want to refer to the number of the condition, that might cover it a bit more for you and give you more time.
It also, one of the modifications, the number of new trees provided as part of the detailed landscaping plan being the satisfaction of the Commission, and importantly, the inclusion of a minimum canopy coverage of 30%, which would be consistent with the state's own urban greening strategy. The recommended conditions have no minimum canopy coverage requirement and instead merely encourage the applicant to do more. In relation to modification 5 and a tree canopy standard, critics of the racetrack component are consistently told that this is only for 3 days, and for the rest of the year, Perth Park is a parkland for community use. If the priority is for the land to genuinely be used as a parkland, then any reasonable person would expect the priority to be landscaping and significant tree canopy coverage. To the contrary, the design prioritises the operational requirements of a 3-day motorsport event over the general public use of the area as parklands for the vast majority of the year.
Thanks, Mr Cruikshank. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I endorse the town's submission so far. I'm going to deal with 2 issues for you. The first one is the purpose of the regional open space reservation under the MRS, and secondly, the noise impact, but from a slightly different angle. With regards to the purpose of the regional open space, Clause 20 of the MRS requires the regional open space reservation land to protect the natural environment, provide recreation consistent with public open space, and safeguard amenity and landscape values. This proposal introduces a portion of a multi-use racetrack enabling motorsport events and extensive hardstand infrastructure such as track, roads and paved plaza. Motorsport itself is fundamentally incompatible with the regional open space reservation's purpose because A, it prioritises intensive, ticketed, high-impact events, not passive or low-impact recreation, and secondly, it introduces industrial-scale noise and infrastructure inconsistent with parkland values. The use is not ancillary to recreation. It is a primary intrusive land use. The proposal therefore undermines the primary intent of the ROS reservation, contrary to Clause 20 and Operational Policy 5.3. In relation to the noise, the statutory task under Clause 43 of the MRS is for the Commission to consider the amenity of the locality, the impact on surrounding land uses, and whether the proposal represents orderly and proper planning. This is not a marginal case. The evidence establishes that the proposal gives rise to substantial and intrusive noise impacts on sensitive residential receivers. This is not just noise. It is noise at a level that no reasonable planning authority should accept near people's homes. The acoustic evidence before you does demonstrate the noise levels are well in excess of accepted standards. The impacts affect residential dwellings in close proximity and a noise profile that is high intensity and intrusive in character. This is critical because the issue is not whether there is some noise. The issue is the magnitude and the nature of that noise. It is significantly above the standards. I refer to the publicly available applicant's Appendix E to its EPA referral modelling showing that the proposed 3-day supercars event, Day 1, 10 distinct motorsports races, including 2 supercars practice and 1 supercars race at 277 laps across the whole day, laps. Day 2, 9 distinct motorsport races, including 2 supercars practice and 1 supercars race, equaling 332 laps in the whole day. And Day 3, 9 distinct motorsports races, including 2 supercars practice and 1 supercars race at 310 laps. Do not be comforted by the suggestion of the applicant that it is on average a 1.5 hour per day supercars race. This is racing for other motorsports categories throughout each day. The predicted noise levels at nearby homes are so high that regardless of the frequency, they represent an unreasonable and unacceptable impact on residential amenity. Infrequency does not cure severity. The applicant relies heavily on the assertion that the events are infrequent, in other words, only once a year. But planning law does not support the proposition that extreme impacts become acceptable simply because they occur occasionally. The Commission must assess severity, impact on sensitive uses, and whether the outcome is reasonable. In this case, the impacts are sufficiently severe that frequency does not render them acceptable. And this is not comparable to stadium noise. The applicant seeks to align this proposal with the broader event precinct. That comparison should be rejected. There is a clear and material difference between crowd or amplified music
Mayor
noise.
Vernon, just wondering if you're continuing on, because I can see you still have a way to go there. Is it all about noise, or are there other issues that you have captured that we could perhaps flesh out through questions?
It is only effectively the noise, but I can leave a couple of these points out and only do the next point, if that's okay.
We've gone nearly 2 minutes over now.
Yes, I was just noting that I don't know when the clock stopped when we had the exchange between yourself and Mr Cruikshank, so I don't know if that impacted it, but I'll try and wrap it up very quickly.
Thank you.
So there is a clear and material difference between crowd or amplified music noise and motorsport noise, which is characterised by sharp peaks, tonal qualities and high intensity bursts. These are qualitatively different impacts and more intrusive in high density residential environments. And it is also said by the applicant that conditions can resolve the core problem, but they suggest management plans, regulatory approvals and event controls, including exemptions, can address the issue. That misses the point. The conclusion from the acoustic assessment that you're being asked to rely upon is that the impact arises from the inherent nature of the activity of motorsports itself. You cannot change the sound of a supercar. You cannot condition away noise levels of 91 decibels on average. Where a use generates unacceptable impacts by design, conditions cannot make that use acceptable, and planning approval must stand on its own merits and not depend on future discretionary controls. So the resulting land use here is conflict, and
Mayor
it's
Vernon,
predictable and
I
ongoing.
have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Yep, thank you. In my submission, this proposal would result in unacceptable adverse amenity impacts. It would create avoidable land use conflict that will be ongoing and permanent, and it does not represent orderly and proper planning. There are reasons why you must amend condition 17 if you are minded to agree to approve this application, to limit motorsports to only one event per year, not just one supercars event per year. If you do not, it will mean there will be an unlimited number of other motorsports, non-supercars style events that will be just as noisy and can operate all the other days of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Thank you very much for your comprehensive deputation today. Members, do you have questions for the Town of Victoria Park? Yes, Commissioner Hall.
Through the Chair, thanks for your presentation. I'm just curious to see if you've reviewed condition 13 and you had any commentary to make on that which speaks to an operations and event management strategy that would then also be submitted through with the advice of the town, and how that could work.
I'm not exactly sure of the question, other than to say that looks like a reasonable requirement, but I guess doesn't take away from the fact that we would say that the noise impacts are not acceptable in the first instance, and no operation event management plan is going to make it acceptable at any point in time. But yeah, I agree with the condition, the comprehensive suite of conditions which will require the town's review. Whether we agree with some of the information that ends up getting submitted, who knows, but ultimately it'll be the department's officers to clear the conditions on our advice.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Probably further to that, condition 14 does talk to the need for a separate approvals to be obtained under the environmental protection noise regulations for activities that exceed the assigned levels under the regs. So it is saying that event-specific noise management plans would be required as part of that. Does that provide you with the assurance that that will need to take place for events? Sorry, I'm asking the deputies, not the audience, but thank you.
No, it doesn't. There's essentially two bits of legislation that need to be satisfied. First of all, I guess the Commission's being asked today whether the noise is acceptable from a planning and amenity perspective. So that's the test today. And if the ultimate decision was yes, this is acceptable and approval is to be granted, then there's a separate regulatory requirement to be met through the noise regulations, through regulations 16 and 18 and 19B potentially. So I guess you need to get through the first hurdle of being satisfied that the amenity impact is acceptable before being able to go to the second test of going through the regulatory requirement under the environmental noise regulations. So no, it doesn't provide a necessary level of comfort that the noise is acceptable from a planning amenity perspective.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further questions? Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. For our final verbal deputation today, we have Sandra McLeish, Ilario Spagnola and Tony Carolino. Please come forwards. Begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the Commission for inviting us here today for our deputation. In summary, while the subject development application is wholly contained within Lot 2001, Canfield Drive and Vic Park Drive, we do acknowledge, however, that the proposed DA works are intended to facilitate access to the wider Perth Park. The proposed Perth Park aims to create a vibrant multi-purpose destination, enhancing Burswood Park's existing activities, delivering new amenities, improved accessibility, and to activate the precinct for community use for the majority of the year. In planning for the Perth Park, OMTID has considered and addressed a wide range of matters, including the environment, landscaping, noise, transport, heritage, review by the Office of Government Architect, stakeholder engagement and operational management. In acknowledging the deputations today, I'll focus on a few of these, namely, 1, environment. So the historic land use in the area has left a legacy of contamination which we are managing in accordance with the Environmental Protection Act and the Contaminated Sites Act, as was done with the stadium project. In terms of the EPA, the Perth Park was referred to the EPA and the EPA's decision was to not assess the project. In terms of the Contaminated Sites Act, the project has engaged a Department of Water and Environment accredited contaminated sites auditor to oversee the investigations and endorsement of all of the environmental management plans in accordance with the Act. This is the same auditor that was used on the stadium project. A construction environmental management plan has been prepared for Perth Park and includes a suite of sub-management plans to address specific environmental matters. Works can only commence following endorsement by the CSA auditor. In terms of landscaping, one of the objectives of the landscape management plan being prepared is to increase the existing tree canopy across the Perth Park site. In terms of the actual DA area, we will include planting of 145 new trees, of which 93 are to be removed as part of the works. With respect to noise, the noise modelling report confirmed that certain proposed events, specifically the motorsport event, would result in exceedances of the standard noise levels under the EPA noise regs. All required approvals will be obtained under the noise regulations for the Perth Park events, which include Regulations 13 for the construction noise, which is exempt if works are undertaken during daytime. Regulation 18 for a single event approval will be sought from the CEO of the Department of Water and Environment Regulation for the initial motorsport event. And Regulation 19B, which will be venue approval, will be sought from the CEO of DEWA for the Perth Park as a venue to facilitate multiple events. Such an approval generally has conditions requiring a noise management plan, which limits number of events, the maximum noise levels, complaints procedures, and the like. The stadium has obtained a Regulation 19B approval from the town of Vic Park. Heritage, we recognise the significance of the site to the traditional owners, and that is very much acknowledged. We have had liaison with the South West Aboriginal Land and Sea Council, and that has occurred, and we've done archaeological and ethnographic surveys have been taken across the entire Perth Park. An Aboriginal advisory group has been established to inform heritage interpretation, public art and landscaping across the Perth Park. In terms of stakeholder engagement for the Perth Park project commenced in mid-2024 and that was guided by the comprehensive community and stakeholder engagement strategy. Included in that was newsletters, website, social media, radio, newspaper and in-person engagement. Extensive feedback and input from the community and stakeholders has been received, acknowledging that the nearby residents are generally not supportive of the proposal. Engagement will continue as the project progresses. So in conclusion, we believe that this particular proposal will provide an asset for the community all year round and allow both the community and residents and others to enjoy the amenities that they have there now, but also improve those amenities through what I've described earlier in terms of the parkland, the landscaping, the amphitheatre, the multi-use building, and yes, there'll be a racetrack for a once-a-year motorsport event, but that racetrack will also be used year-round for items such as cycling and criterium events. That's it from my side.
Thank you very much for your deputation today. Over to you, members, for questions. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Shears.
Thank you for your deputation. I'm just wondering in relation to the noise, and we heard from the town of Vic Park in relation to that exceedance of around 10 to 15 dB. I'm just wondering if you can talk through a little bit around what might likely be the cause of that variation, if you can give us a little bit more information around that.
Yeah, probably need technical from a noise point of view, but...
Okay, the noise modelling report, as the Mayor indicated, was done as a preliminary time.
Sandra, just to let you know, with the microphones, they do require you to speak very closely into them for them to pick up the sound. Thank you.
The noise modelling report is just that, it's a modelling report. It was based on the early concepts for the park. At that stage, the amphitheatre design wasn't yet known, the final design wasn't yet known, so it's a modelling report. That modelling report is now in the throes of being updated. Notwithstanding, it identified that there will be exceedances, and it identified where those exceedances would occur. And we acknowledge that that will occur, and it's predominantly the apartments, some ground level residential units and the upper levels. In accordance with the noise regulations, we will be seeking the approvals of the single event, the first motorsport event. We'll seek an approval under Regulation 18. The aim of that is to use that to identify and do close monitoring of the noise from the first motorsport event. That will then inform the mitigation measures that might be put in place. That will then inform the subsequent Regulation 19B approval or application that we'll seek. That's similar to the stadium. And for your information as well, Venues West, they will operate the entire Perth Park as well as the stadium. They currently have a Reg 19B venue approval for the stadium events. And just for some context, there was mention made of the noise from the stadium. Some of the noise from the stadium isn't as loud as you would expect. So the sirens are 55 dB, which is not that significant, whereas the PA system is actually 70 dBA, which is far greater than we would have expected. There's a monster truck event at the stadium, which has been 70 and 80 dBA, and a concert, maybe not Sheeran, but when there's a big concert on, that was 60 to 80 dBA. So as a comparison, as was mentioned, the motorsport event, 78 to 85 dBA may well be the average at that sensitive receptor, and we've just picked the ones, the residential towers. A concert at the amphitheatre could be 55 to 72. Depending on the size of this concert, depending on the actual design of the amphitheatre, it's to be designed to try and contain the noise as opposed to release the noise. Does that answer your question?
Could I please ask people to refrain from talking while we're listening to the response to the questions? Thank you.
Through the chair, I just have a couple more questions. Just in relation to, I guess, you may not have the answer to this in terms of, I guess, the predicted noise modelling that you have done. Was there any comparison to other sort of street circuits that exist? So I'm thinking of Gold Coast, which is an established street circuit which does have supercars and had Indy cars a long time ago. I'm just wondering if any sort of data has been available from there?
The noise modelling report did make some reference to that, but every site is quite different, which is why that first Reg 18 approval will allow us to capture the data specific to this site, because we're surrounded by water, we're quite low lying, it'll be very different to every other site. So that's why the modelling at the moment is saying one thing, but until we actually can realise it on an event and capture it, every site is quite unique.
And through Chair, just one more question. In terms of potential mitigation measures, and I know it's difficult to say until you have more data, what are they likely to be in this instance, do you think?
We just had that discussion. The physical ability to limit noise, we're talking about the top stories of the residential towers. You can't mitigate the noise through there. The management plans, the noise management plans generally limit the noise levels, so the cars would have to maintain that level, that's their exceedance. They would also limit the number of events, so regardless of what the planning regime might say, the noise regs could limit the number of events that can be held within the Perth Park, and that could include the number of concert events as well as motorsport events or any other events. But in terms of trying to build noise walls, that's not a feasible approach.
Thank you, members. Any further questions? Thank you, Commissioner Adair.
Thank you, Chair. One of the previous deputies was talking about Indigenous engagement. You mentioned that you had some engagement with SWALSC. Can you outline exactly what that engagement was and what feedback, if any, you had from elders?
Yep. We actually lodged, I think with reference to the previous CEO, we actually engaged with the current CEO and the SWALS. We lodged an activity notice with SWALS to identify the proposed project. We requested their advice on the need to undertake ethnographic and archaeological surveys. They agreed, they identified elders. We undertook the works on site, and that report was provided back to DPLH. We've also approached the Wurundjeri Advisory, the Wurundjeri Aboriginal Corporation with regard to nominations for the advisory group, which will be established, as Laro mentioned. So that group meets within the next 2 weeks, so members have been identified for inclusion in that group. And that's the same model that was used for the stadium, where we had significant Aboriginal input into landscaping and public art.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair, some of the questions that have been raised around amenity and the impact on residents, I mean, I understand, I listened to your deputation, but it kind of skirted that specifically. What investigations were undertaken as part of this process to look at the location of this and its proximity to residents and the potential impact?
You're talking about prior to the project, or what other locations, what other venue, or other
yes,
locations?
So this has been identified, yeah, for this.
So there was some work done to look at other locations within the city. We're looking at a street circuit in here, so there were other locations at East Perth and Langley Park, etc., that were looked at. And obviously with all of these, you look at, you have to balance all the, like a multi-criteria analysis to look at all the impacts to that, including impacts to traffic, to residents in those particular areas, of which this was one of them, and this was found to be the preferred option, if you like, with respect to balancing all that criteria, and that's why we've landed on this particular site. And obviously from there, we now look at what are the actual impacts in that particular site, as we've said before, going through all the investigations with respect to the noise, with respect to the contaminated site, with respect to the environment. We go through the myriad of environmental, management plans and investigations to allow us to actually put the proposal in, and also to refer it to environment and the like to get our relevant approvals.
Sorry, if I could just add, one of the criteria as well was access to public transport. You might recall when the stadium project was developed, it was based on a fans first focus, whereby pedestrians had priority and access was public transport. $300 million was spent on the bridge and the new train station upgrades, etc. This site is making use of the same facilities, so that we're not having to build new facilities elsewhere. So it's to actually consolidate that government investment that was made in 2014 on this park.
Members, any further questions? Thank you very much. Commissioner Brooks.
We've heard from some of the deputations some concerns around management of stormwater quality and runoff on the site. Can you provide a little bit of an understanding of how stormwater and groundwater will be managed at the site and how that differs, if it does differ from the current site?
So it's safe to say that from my understanding, there is existing drainage at the moment. That won't change the volume.
Sorry, would you mind speaking into the microphone? Thank you.
So in terms of quality, that won't change, nor will the volumes change with regard to operational stormwater drainage.
And there will be a stormwater management plan prepared. There's a dewatering management plan, a sub-environmental management plan as part of our KEMP, and then there'll be a separate stormwater management plan to be prepared. We've had close liaison with the Swan River Trust to ensure that there's no impact of runoff into the river. The water sensitive urban design is the basis on which the stormwater management is to be, the stormwater management plan is being prepared, and there's a number of swales. We've removed the old irrigation lakes, which didn't actually form, they weren't natural lakes, they were irrigation ponds. We're removing most of those and incorporating swales to allow for water sensitive urban design, as well as some underground chambers, the Atlas chambers. There's some already under Campfield Drive, and that allows for the absorption and the slow release of stormwater. The site has a high water table, so it's always an issue trying to manage it. But in terms of event day, the runoff from anything on the track will be carefully managed in accordance with the environmental management plans, and the day-to-day stormwater will be captured through the swales and the V-drains and the whole integrated system with the minimum impact on the river.
Just one more through you, Chair. Outside of the motorsport event, when other events are occurring, what's the how does the scale of those events compare to the types of events that already tend to occur on there?
One of the criteria for Venues West, we're still in that discussion. Venues West and Burswood Park Board are working on that at the moment, that operational overlay. And one of the criteria is that existing community events will still occur within the Burswood Park Board area, regardless of Venues West. So that's including the Christmas markets and the cinemas and things that already occur. We're looking at a community calendar, which hasn't yet been developed, but Venues West already trying to identify what that community calendar might include. The transport modelling looked at events at the upper scale, the 60,000 down to a 12,000 amphitheatre event. The amphitheatre has capacity of 12,000, so we expect there'll be smaller events, community events in the amphitheatre, but it has a maximum capacity of 12,000. So that's where we see that would sit.
Thank you. Commissioner Hall.
Thanks, Jen. This is just a follow-up on the question on regards to the engagement with traditional owners. The MRS does talk about regional open space, safeguarding important sites of cultural significance. Just through that engagement, were there any sites of cultural significance identified?
Not within the Perth Park. There used to be a registered burial site which encompassed most of the peninsula. That was then removed from the register a few years ago. There was a review by DPLH as to what warranted registered sites. That one was removed. So as part of the stadium, it was in place, and we had a Section 18 approval for the stadium, which covered all of that. That was since removed. The only sites that remain are 2 campsites in vicinity. They're one at Windan and one towards the train station. We're not impacting any of those sites, but we do appreciate that this whole area, it was mudflats, and it's an integral part of the Swan River environment. So that is our consideration, and that's why there will be the interpretation and the input of the elders in the landscaping and the public art.
Okay, and just one further question through you, Chair. You mentioned that there will be multiple events and there's documentation around potential predictive modelling of supercars and the amphitheatre, and you've mentioned cycling. is there any events that you're aware of that would have a greater potential impact than the supercars?
Last year there was one. That was on one day, Burswood Park Board hosted WA Day, and it happened to be the cricket test series all in the one day. So they had 60,000 at the stadium, and they thought they had around 40 to 50,000 on WA Day. That was the first time that had ever occurred. Luckily, with cricket, people come and go at different times. It's not like a football game where there's an exodus within 15 minutes. Similarly, WA Day, people came and went. That demonstrated that the public transport system worked. It demonstrated that the event planning worked, because Venues West and Burswood Park Board worked very closely together to ensure that they could operate both, because WA Day was set and then the cricket came later. So that gave us confidence in our scenario planning. But our scenario planning in terms of transport, we've looked at 73,000 as well. 73,000 capacity is the average for a concert at the stadium. Seating for an AFL game is 60, but usually it's 54,000. But for a concert, it's 72,000 ticketed. So we've modelled that. We've looked at what the scenario would mean for that. There's no opportunity for a stadium event and a motorsport event to be held consecutively, because a motorsport event, the track effectively stops people accessing the stadium. What we anticipate is the motorsport event may have 50 to 60,000 people. Post that motorsport event, there may well be an amphitheatre event as a follow-on or a stadium event as a follow-on, yet to be determined, but there won't be events that are together. Also, there's unlikely to be a stadium event and an amphitheatre event just because of the conflicting noise from both events. But that event calendar is yet to be worked out, and one of the questions that had been raised by DPLH previously was, how do we protect the interests and how do we protect the stadium from competition effectively in other events? Luckily now, Venues West will manage all of it, and that's where they're looking at providing or preparing an operational framework plan to look at how all of this is coordinated as one, rather than the stadium separate to the Perth Park, to ensure that there's no conflict and that they can actually optimise the community as well as the other events that will take place.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Brooks, you had a further question?
Yes, sorry. Can you give me a bit better understanding of the types of activities that occur during the bump in, bump out periods, and how long that's likely to last?
For the supercars event you're talking about? Yeah, so typically the bump in, bump out is obviously we need to set up things like crash barriers, the fencing. Those are a significant component of that. There might be supercars may require some media tents and those types of things. Obviously power, those screens, those types of things. So you can imagine for a supercars event, to stage of an event like that, which will be part of the operations, there would be all those types of facilities. I mean, one of the biggest ones is the barriers and the fencing around the track. That's a critical element, which will take a bit of time to do. So those are the types of activities that would happen for a supercars event. We're still working on the operational overlay for that. We're looking to minimise that bump in time, as we're conscious of the stadium and the stadium events that need to be there and other events, and also conscious of the impact. So we're looking to minimise that bump in time and working with IEDM, our consultants, and supercars to try and minimise that number. So I don't have a period in terms of a definitive period, but there will be a bump in period and a bump out period. Well, they do that on the Gold Coast, and they do that very quickly. Straight after the last race, they're in there and demobilising, and they have all temporary facilities there, whereas we have some permanent facilities. So we have a lot less bump in than somewhere like the Gold Coast, and they're in there and they're out, and they do close a major highway there as well. So they're well versed in knowing how to go about it, but we need to still finalise the operational overlay, which will determine that. But we're conscious that we need to minimise that time, but that's the type of activities that will be undertaken.
Thank you. And you may have mentioned earlier, we did mention earlier in your deputation, but if you can just ventilate a bit further, What is the primary use of the proposed park for a majority of the year?
So for the majority of the year, it's parkland use, and for the community use, obviously there will be some events there like cycling, etc., that will come in as part of that. But for the majority of the year, it's there for the community to use, much as they utilise it now. But also, obviously, with the amphitheatre, there'll be amphitheatre events for use. Cycling, as I said, recreational type activities, and that's pretty much the majority of the year. The 3 days a year will be the motorsport event, but the design and everything has taken into account that that's the majority use of the parkland.
Thank you. And this is probably an inverse question from a former question, but what mitigation measures were not modelled that you think could reduce the impacts in terms of noise of that event moving forward?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay. And sorry, I'm just being distracted, Chair, from the gallery, but in terms of I'll just recover my thoughts and I'll come back.
That's okay. I can take this opportunity to ask you, you had something that you have dealt with, but I just thought I'd give you the opportunity, given that it has come up quite significantly through deputations and submissions around tree canopy. There is a landscape plan, and it does does acknowledge in the report that you are uplifting canopy, but the landscape plan and supporting advice note does talk about maximising tree canopy coverage. Obviously, we've had a request from the town to maximise that very clearly into the sort of 40% category, but I do also understand that there are site constraints, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk to that.
Yeah, the area within Lot 2001 currently is the stadium precinct. When the stadium was built, a lot of the infrastructure was located south of the stadium. It's a bit of a spaghetti junction through there. A lot of services, they're all managed by what's called the DBFM, Design, Build, Finance, Maintain contractor under Venues West. When we go in, we have to relocate some of those services. We have to also install some new services for our facility. So there's got to be some earthworks through that area. We're very mindful of the ability to move those services without doing any damage. We're also very mindful of the need for pedestrian access. The pedestrian modelling that has been undertaken demonstrated that for the motorsport event and some of the larger events, there could well be pedestrian congestion at Marley Loop. In liaison with Venues West, they insisted that we couldn't remove any more trees in order to widen some of those areas, that we're going to have to just put temporary boardwalks through. So we're reducing the number of trees we have to remove. So we're trying to minimise the number of trees we are removing. But bear in mind, these trees were all planted 15 years ago as part of the stadium project. Before that, it was just part of the golf course, and then we did significant earthworks through that area, took everything out, surcharged, and built the stadium. So the trees are there. They will be removed. 93 of them will be removed throughout the whole area, and we'll replace them with 145 trees. We've tried best we can to maximise the number of trees. We've got sightline issues, we've got pedestrian safety issues, and we've got this practical constraint of not being able to put them in the ground because of the existing services that are prolific through that area.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Sandry, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you. In terms of the proposed conditions, are there any objections to any of the conditions? And have you reviewed the deputation made by the Town of Victoria Park and their suggested modified conditions as well, if you have any comment on that?
Thanks. Yes, we've reviewed the conditions and provided our support to the conditions. We've reviewed the town's conditions and provided our review and our comment on the council's condition change with respect to tree canopy and the need to measure all of the trees before they're removed. So we've made that known to DPLH officers. The conditions as they are on the agenda, we're happy with those.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any further questions? Thank you very much for your deputation. That does conclude our verbal deputations for today, but I do want to note that we have received a number of written deputations. They are from Rosemary Warries, Chris Groom, Kay Ross, Leslie Mackay, Fred Goh, Lisa Rossi and Vicky Caulfield, all who have presented as residents and all in opposition to the recommendation before us today. So we will now move to the item for the purpose of today, and before dealing with the item we will invite the officers who have assessed the application to come forward to make any comments and to provide responses to any questions from the Commission. So today we are joined by Dale Sanderson, Gary McGowan, Delia Negley and Kelsey Whitwell from the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. Thank you. I understand, Dale, you're starting and then we'll hand over to Gary.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've had a scratch in my throat all day.
I just want to check, does anyone need water? We do have water for the officers if needed, and for anyone else in the room, please just let us know and we can bring some to you.
So briefly, Burswood Peninsula now accommodates a range of recreation oriented activities from the stadium down to parks and playgrounds. It has become a significant recreation precinct and is highly accessible. The site of the development is reserved for regional open space in the Metropolitan Region scheme, and the proposed use is consistent with the purpose of that reservation. The challenge of accommodating infrastructure and the amenity necessary to support the growing population of Perth and Peel does in some instances create tension. And so while there will be some impact from the proposed land use or development, we do recommend the proposal be supported, but with a suite of conditions to manage events. Gary's going to talk in more detail to the assessment, and then we'll also just provide a response to the recommended changes to conditions that the town have provided through their submission at the end, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a small presentation that I'd like to take. And without doubling up on what you said in your opening statement, I'll just start with that presentation, if that's okay. Next slide, if somebody can. Just a quick overview. The development application is illustrated within the red bordered line, and the development within that line includes landscaping and public relevant improvements in association with the Arrivals Plaza to Perth Park. The construction of a multi-use racetrack that equates to about 580 metres, and incidental road, earth and drainage works. The application was advertised in accordance with Clause 41 of the Metropolitan Region Scheme. That resulted in 281 submissions being received, and the breakdown of that was that 84.34% were not supportive, 7.47 were supportive with changes, and 8.19 was supported. Worth noting that the majority of the submissions did respond to the Perth Park proposal as a whole, and those submissions that were supportive with changes generally referred to the removal of the racetrack. So the scope of the development application to be determined relates only to the portion of Perth Park site comprising 3 parcels of Crown land. That is Lot 2001, up to Stadium Precinct, Lot 2006, Canfield Drive Road Reserve, and a portion of Victoria Park Drive Road Reserve. And as we mentioned, the balance of the Perth Park project is being considered under the Burswood Island Agreement Act 1985. The development site is reserved regional open space under the Metropolitan Region Scheme, and the reserve purpose under the management order for Lot 2001 up to Stadium Precinct is for sport, recreation and entertainment purposes. Next slide. So in terms of the assessment, the key matters considered was the extent to which the proposed development is consistent with orderly and proper planning principles, the purpose of the regional open space reservation, and other matters set out in Clause 43 of the MRS. We looked
that the extent to which the development is compatible with the neighbouring land uses, noting that the relevant planning considerations extend beyond the WFPC's regulatory responsibility to a wider area, and also into locations where enabling works have already commenced, and the extent to which the proposed development adequately addresses environmental impacts, including contamination, flora and fauna, and operational noise impacts, and whether the design response for the landscaping components responds to the broader Perth Park proposal and the existing stadium precinct, and the extent to which access to and from events at Perth Park has been adequately addressed. Next slide. So in terms of land use, as Dale alluded to, the Burswood Peninsula is established an evolving recreation and sporting and entertainment precinct. It's located immediately adjacent to the city centre, with a high level of accessibility from most parts of Perth and the Peel region. The overarching vision of the relevant planning documents provide for a mix of parkland, entertainment and sporting uses. And in terms of the proposed landscape aspects, they are consistent with the intent of the regional open space and orderly and proper planning principles in terms of their scope and scale. However, the multi-use racetrack will have noise impacts of a scale and intensity that cannot be contained to the precinct boundary, but those impacts are limited and can be managed. Next slide. So in terms of the environment and the operational noise, modelling does indicate that the nearby apartments would experience the highest noise impacts, especially from the multi-use racetrack. And conditions are a suitable response to help mitigate those noise impacts. Noise impacts will also be further regulated by DWER under the noise regulations. In terms of contamination, Lot 2001 is classified as remediated for restricted use, and that follows the construction of the stadium. Canfield Drive Road Reserve is classified as possibly contaminated, investigation required, and conditions are also a suitable response to deal with contamination matters. In terms of flora and fauna, there's no naturally occurring fauna habitat within the development application site, and there are no threatened ecological communities or no priority ecological communities. In terms of trees, within the development application site, the development will see 288 trees, and that represents an uplift from 236 trees. In terms of the tree coverage across the broader Perth Park site, indications are that would be 12%, and that represents an increase up from 4%. And similarly, conditions are a suitable response to deal with landscaping matters. Next slide. In terms of design, the Perth Park proposal has been reviewed by the Government Architect of Western Australia on 3 occasions, and several conditions are recommended to address design matters raised by the Government Architect. Next slide. In terms of movement, the transport strategy for Perth Park is based on the same principles applied to Optus Stadium, with a public transport first event-based management access model being implemented. Future events at Perth Park will attract varying levels of patronage, depending on the size and the type of the event. However, the attendance is expected to be broadly consistent with existing patronage at Optus Stadium. And there are no changes to the overall transport approach required. Pedestrian modelling does indicate that a level of service will be maintained, except at one location during the Supercars event, and that will require some tailored specific measures to ensure safe and functional flow of patrons. In terms of parking, parking will be reduced by 135 bays across Perth Park, but there will be an additional 36 accessible bays. And the recommendation is for conditions to require transport and operational management strategies to be prepared, which will include requirements for more detailed event-based event-specific plans to be prepared and tailored to each event. And that concludes. Myself, Delia, and Dale and Kelsey are available to answer questions.
Thank you very much. We'll go to questions. Commissioner Sandry.
Thank you, and thank you for the deputation and also the report. Just for clarity, clause 43 under the MRS, to satisfy the Commission, is it applied in the sense that the provisions that only relate to state or regional importance are to be considered? Is that correct?
I think the way I would put it is that the Metropolitan Region scheme is a regional scheme. So that's, I guess, the lens you would place on those. All matters need to be considered, but it's the lens you would place on those considerations compared to assessment under a local planning scheme, if that's the genesis of the question.
But are all matters to be considered, or only matters that are of state or regional importance?
All matters are to be considered. The MRS says the extent, and to the extent they are of state or regional importance.
Okay. And
sorry, I apologise.
That's okay.
To be clear, the MRS says the Commission must have regard to the following matters if and to the extent they are of state or regional importance. That's exactly what's required.
Yeah, thank you. And in terms of the application that's before the Commission, it's part of the greater precinct, and that was clearly articulated through the presentation, so thank you for that. In terms of the noise that's being generated as part of this application, is it on par with what is expected from the application that was considered as part of the Casino Act area, or is it more or less?
Yeah, so in terms of the other portion, we have not been involved in that assessment, and we've not provided details of that assessment. But in terms of the noise impacts as it relates to the development application site, that data has been extracted from the acoustic assessment provided under the EPA application.
And that's for the overall racetrack,
yeah,
which includes the Crown Act land as well.
Correct, yeah.
Yep. Thank you. And in terms of the trees, it was it states that 12% canopy or tree coverage will be applied. That's just for this portion of the site only, not factoring in what will be occurring on the Crown Act land?
No, the 12% refers to the entire, full Perth Park project.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And in terms of the remit of conditions that the department's put forward, how is compliance undertaken in relation to those conditions?
Yeah, so any clearance or compliance with those conditions, it can only relate to the development application site. So we will be looking at whatever's provided to clear those conditions, just as it relates to that site, and that's where the extent in which the clearance can go to.
Just to expand on that, what department process? Does the department have a section who would undertake compliance? So if there was a complaint, would undertake compliance against the conditions, just to understand kind of what the remit is in terms of compliance undertaken by the department.
Yes, in several of the conditions we do refer to the advice of other agencies, and if there is a compliance matter, we would, I suppose, effectively require advice in that respect as well.
And
there's a team internally to support us if there's a compliance.
Okay, great. So there's a team internally at the department that will deal with any compliance actions should there be any. Okay, thank you. That's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Members' questions? Thank you, Commissioner Hall, and then Commissioner Brooks.
Just further to the tree canopy mentioned 12% across the entire Perth Park, but I do want to know what is it for this portion that's subject to the application before us.
Yeah, we don't have a figure for the tree canopy coverage as it relates to the site. We did seek additional information to increase tree canopy coverage as it relates to the DA site. However, we were advised that the operational requirements and the underground utilities that do exist within the development application site, that the tree coverage cannot be further increased beyond what is proposed in the development application.
Okay, Okay, so that was my next sort of question around why is it you might perceive as being low and the town's asking for it to be much greater, but is it, what I'm understanding is that there are underground services, there's hard stand areas, building areas, and it's been maximised to the extent possible?
That's my understanding, yes, in terms of the design.
And the town's recommendation links to a strategy for the whole of Perth and Peel. So the 30% target is a whole of Perth and Peel target. In the same way, density is applied differently across the city. Residential density is applied differently across the city. There'll be sites that achieve 5 to 10, just 15, and there'll be sites that achieve near 100. And I guess the intent is that overall we balance at 30%.
Just a further question through your chair. Just with regards to noise in the presentation, it said that it can be managed. And I just want to know how exactly, just to tease that out, how it's going to be managed, because as I understand it, some of the impacts, although for only a short period of time, would exceed the amount. And we did hear from the proponent that some of those sensitive receptors, like apartments, would be difficult to reduce their noise impact. So just how does can be managed? How can it be managed?
Yeah, I suppose we acknowledge and we accept that the noise impacts are significant, and they cannot be contained to the development application site. But they are they're intermittent and occurring just for one race event per year. I guess they can be managed. I suppose is that it talks to the other approvals being needed under the noise regulations, and the application. The recommendation is for a noise management strategy to be prepared, which will include a requirement for individual tailored noise management plans to be prepared for each event.
And I see there's conditions 13, 14, 16 that relate to that. Would that include or extend to like real-time noise monitoring and the like?
The details of the noise management strategy will, I guess, be teased out and what might be included in that. I'm not aware of live noise modelling data being obtained. I do understand in terms of the noise regulations that the noise data from the race event will be obtained after the race event. So that data will be used to I suppose inform a future.
Can I just ask members of the audience to please be respectful throughout the meeting? We have afforded that respect throughout deputations, and it is important that we maintain that through the meeting. Thank you very much.
If I may, just to tease this out. So I understand that Optus Stadium events, they do exceed the noise limits, and there's a process around that. So with this events on this site, would it follow the same process? Is that how it would work?
So noise events are managed in the stadium under the precinct-wide 19B of the regulations. I'm not across all of the noise regulations, but I can't talk to what data might be required or obtained under the stadium.
But prior to an event of a supercar, there would need to be those approvals in place. Is that right?
There would need to be a noise regulation approval issued by DWER.
Just got more questions, if that's okay, Chair. So in the advertising, I saw there's 281 submissions, and I did hear earlier in today's meeting there was commentary that the advertising was considered to be insufficient. That was put to us. 281 submissions is a fair amount. Can you just go over, I understand the Metropolitan Region Scheme doesn't specify a minimum time frame, and we did extend the time frame. And there was mention of some pop-ups and other things. Can you just explain the extent of the consultation, just so I can understand whether or not it was sufficient?
Yeah, so in terms of the advertising of the development application, that was under clause 41 of the MRS. It was for 21 days, which exceeds the 14 days.
Sorry, Gary, we've just had a request if you could speak a bit more closely to your microphone, if you wouldn't mind moving it towards you. Thank you.
Yeah, so the development application was advertised under Clause 41 of the MRS. That requires advertising to be a minimum of 14 days. We did advertise for 21 days, so beyond the minimum amount. In terms of any advertising that occurred prior to the development application, that would have rested with UMTID. But I do understand that advertising or engagement did commence in 2004, mid-2004. And there was engagement in May and November of 2005 over multiple methods of advertising and engagement.
Okay, thank you. I just have a question with regards to, we heard about the land use category and the use and the consistency. Does this have a land use category under the Metropolitan Region Scheme?
There are no, so the Metropolitan Region Scheme doesn't contain a land use table in the way a local planning scheme does. It contains, each reservation or zone has a purpose. So the purpose of the Metropolitan Region Scheme, just bear with me. The purpose of the Regional Open Space Reservation under the scheme is to protect the natural environment, provide recreational and cultural opportunities, safeguard important landscapes and sites of cultural or historical significance, and provide for public access.
And through you, Chair, my final question is, with regards to the Burswood Lake structure plan, we did also hear a presentation saying that this was not consistent with, and I see in the report there's commentary around the non-statutory nature and the more of a guiding nature of the structure plan. Could you expand on this proposal relative to the requirements of that structure plan, please?
The Burswood Lakes structure plan or the?
Yes.
Or the district structure plan?
The district.
Districts. Yeah, so the district structure plan was endorsed by the Commission in 2015. It is a non-statutory document and it is used to guide development in the Burswood Peninsula.
And so is this proposal consistent or inconsistent? Or?
Yeah, we would say that it's consistent with the overarching intent by acknowledging that there's no specific reference to the development being proposed today, but it does talk to a growing tourism destination and an expanding entertainment and sporting precinct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brooks.
Through the Chair, if I could...
Oh, yes, sure. Delia, thank you.
Through the Chair, if I could add something to that might be helpful. The district structure plan is a high-level structure plan, but it does divide the peninsula into precincts, and the Optus Stadium occupies one precinct, which includes some of our land, the part of the application, and then another precinct, another portion. So the development site occupies two precincts. The stadium precinct very clearly is planned for active sporting events, but of interest is that the southern stadium precinct, I think it's called Stadium South. The key feature includes potential mix of urban development and sporting facilities. So rather specific. Of course, it does also talk to landscape buffers, etc., but it does indicate sporting facilities.
We do have a follow-up question on that, so if I could just go to Bianca, to Commissioner Sandry before we go to you, Commissioner Brooks, if that's okay.
Thank you. Just in terms of that district structure plan, what weight does it have in accordance with the Metropolitan Region Scheme and what's to be considered by the WAPC today, particularly with Clause 43?
it's a non-statutory document compared to the Metropolitan Region Scheme, which is very much a statutory document. So in comparison, the Metropolitan Region Scheme is a higher order. In addition, it wasn't, being non-statutory, it wasn't endorsed to be implemented in a statutory context. It was to provide high-level guidance for an area that was recognised as a precinct that would evolve in the future, and to provide that high-level guidance. So it's not uncommon, or it's very common for statutory decisions to recognise high-level guidance, but then the detail, but not necessarily then implement that detail. They're to give a general view. So the weight is not as significant as an MRS or as any other statutory document.
Thank you. Commissioner Brooks.
Some of the deputations have referred to Condition 17 and the concerns around the fact that it specifies supercars in brackets as a part of that condition. Can you give us a bit of an understanding as to whether there is a risk associated with that condition that other motorsport events could occur at other times and still comply?
Yep. So the words, ironically, the word supercar was added to provide clarity. We wanted to make it clear that what has been assessed is the supercar proposal. We haven't assessed a Formula One proposal, for example. So I think if the condition's read in conjunction with the report, I think the intent of the condition is clear to me, but I can understand why perhaps it's been interpreted slightly differently. In the end, if a proposal came forward for another motorsport event, it's a separate process in my mind, whether it's an amendment to this development application or a new development application. In my mind, the approval, the condition is around one motorsport event, supercars based.
And sorry, just to follow on. And so if there was a proposal for another event, another motorsport event, we're satisfied that these conditions would mean that a separate approval or an amended approval would be required for that for any additional motorsport events.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Commissioner Shears, and then Commissioner Adair. Is it related? Please go ahead.
Thank you. I actually want to explore that a little further, because the application in front of us is for a portion. It doesn't actually state supercars anywhere, and in the recommendation it says to approve the application for development of earthworks and drainage construction of a portion of the multi-use racetrack. It doesn't say supercar racetrack. So I just think we need to be quite clear on this, because then the condition 17 is very specific, but the approval as recommended is actually for a multi-use racetrack. It's not for a supercar racetrack.
So condition 17 is targeted at motorsport. So motorsport is limited to one event, supercar based, per year. The track itself will be used for other events like cycling, but condition 17 is targeting motorsport only.
Okay.
It's dealing with that component only.
I think, well, I'll keep listening to the questions, but I think that condition possibly needs some work. It may be your intention, but I think it's wide open for interpretation that can only come for 3 days, but any other motorsport could come for additional. That's my reading of it, but...
Through the Chair, if I could just add one additional point of clarification. I recognise the potential for difference interpretation, but one thing to note is that the application itself, the explanatory report, was very specific that the track was for the purpose of one annual
motorsport event.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, just that may well be the case, but the recommendation, and should it be the resolution of the WAPC, will be read in isolation. It won't be read in context of a report that goes behind it. So the actual wording of that recommendation and the conditions that go with it need to be very specific to whatever that is, that decision is, not the report, respectfully.
Thank you, Commissioner Shears.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just wondering if officers have any comment in relation to the Town of Vic Park's other suggested modifications on conditions. So I know there was also some modifications requested to some notes and also other conditions and notes, if you're able to sort of talk through those.
Happily. So modification 1 was condition 17, which we've just discussed. I probably don't have more to add at the moment. Modification 2, we don't support that new advice note. It's actually more, as if not more prescriptive than a condition. Modification 3 is a new proposed condition that seeks a plan showing the number of trees to be removed and retained. We don't support that addition. The latest plans received already clearly indicate which trees are to be removed, retained and proposed, so to impose a condition is duplicative. Modification 4 is to amend condition 7A. The addition, so the condition's actually broader than the proposed addition, so we don't support that addition. And the detail is covered in the advice note in any event, related advice note. Modification 5, we don't support the specification of 30% tree canopy coverage. In response to questions a little while ago, we did talk to tree canopy coverage and the fact that for a development like this, it's probably not, well, that 30% is an overall target, and realistically, this is a part of the city that won't necessarily achieve that average. Modification 5, Roman 2, we have no objection to. That's the addition of the words depth and width of structural root zones and details of tree protection zones. Roman 13.
Before you move on to that, Dale, just noting that in the email it also has advice note D4, which does also include some additional wording which the DPLH officers have supported with modification. That's the location, species and quantity of all proposed plantings, including expected canopy coverage at maturity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So addition, that was Roman 13 we're up to. We don't have any objection to that addition. So that is the last, that was, I will note, yeah, that was the last submitted with the exception of the email, which, thank you, Chair, you've covered the first point, and the second point in the email page related to bump in and bump out requirements and time frames for major and minor events. We thought that was an appropriate addition to the advice note, to that particular advice note H.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions before we move to deliberations? Thank you very much, officers. There being no further questions, we will move to deal with the item for today's meeting, which is the development application for the portion of Perth Park determination. Is there a mover and seconder for the officer recommendation before us? Moved by Commissioner Shears, seconded by Commissioner Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate there's been a lot of discussion today and a lot of concerns raised in the room. In terms of me coming to my conclusion today, I've considered the views of the audience that have attended, also the written submissions that we received as part of our report, and also the written deputations that we received as part of the deputation package, particularly in relation to noise. I gave careful consideration around the motorsport event and the impact that is likely to have on the adjoining residents, the impact of the vegetation loss, the site contamination issues, the stormwater management issues, and any potential impacts on the Swan River. As part of my consideration, I also looked carefully at the impact on tree canopy and how improvements can be made in that respect. In considering my decision today to support the application, I have also considered the matters under clause 43 of the MRS, noting both the specific scope of the Commission's role today and the limited portion of the project that we are considering. In particular, the purpose of the regional open space, the relevant state and regional planning policies, and how this proposal fits more broadly into the Burswood Peninsula, including its evolving role as a regional destination for sport, recreation and entertainment. And while the proposal does require the exercise of discretion from the Commission today, I am satisfied that the proposal is representative of orderly and proper planning, and that it does further the intent of the regional open space reservation. And I believe it will help facilitate additional recreational and cultural opportunities through the area and support the existing stadium precinct and entertainment precinct to further flourish. I appreciate the concerns around noise and accept that this is a real impact to residents in the local area and that these levels will exceed expected and anticipated assigned levels. But I do note that this event is only limited to 3 days per year, and it's limited in duration for that period as well. It is subject to a different regulatory control under the Environmental Protection Regulations, and I believe those requirements and restrictions are capable of managing the event. I think the conditions that officers have recommended also will help manage this event frequency and duration, and that the updated acoustic modelling will help further manage this issue. Importantly, this aspect of the proposal is only one component of what we are considering today. I'm considered overall that the assessment process undertaken by the officers has identified key issues, and their recommendation does include conditions which will address any concerns raised today. On balance, having regard to the strategic role of the peninsula, the established precinct in being an entertainment and sporting precinct, the limited scope of the development that is being carried out that we are assessing today, and the ability to manage these impacts through conditions other than regulatory matters, I will support this application today. In summary and on balance, I believe the proposal doesn't compromise the purpose of the regional open space reservation and does represent an acceptable form from a state and regional planning perspective, while recognising that careful and ongoing management will be a critical element to ensure this project is delivered appropriately, which is why I'm supportive of Officer's recommendation today.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Shears. Commissioner Brooks, do you wish to comment?
Yes. Just to continue from that, I've also considered all the materials provided and listened very closely to the deputations we've heard today. I understand that the dual approvals process for the two different parts of the site is complicated and is difficult for people to understand, but that's where we are, and that's what we have to, how we have to approach this approval today. I recognise that the area is a well-loved outdoor space on the riverfront, and that landscape changes, whatever they are in those areas, are going to be important and watched closely by the community. Having considered the development plans, I'm comfortable that the proposal retains and prioritises ongoing public access and recreation in the space, and includes landscaped areas with additional tree planting consistent with the purpose of the regional open space under the MRS. In relation to the tree canopy, whilst an overarching target of 30% has been adopted for the Perth region, it has always been acknowledged that it's not always going to be possible to achieve 30% everywhere. In this case, we can see that attempts are being made to increase tree canopy cover within the proposal area, albeit at a lesser degree. I'm satisfied that the advice notes, and particularly advice note D, contains encouragement to the proponent to continue looking at opportunities for increased tree canopy, and I'm certain that this will be a key focus when detailed landscape plans are reviewed in future. In relation to site contamination, an accredited contaminated sites auditor will be overseeing the work, and I'm satisfied that that will be in compliance with the Contaminated Sites Act. And in relation to noise, whilst the significant noise that will be generated by motorsport is acknowledged, I note that the proposal before us includes approval for one motorsport event per year over 3 days only. Any additional motorsport events would require the approval to be amended or a new approval to be sought. And in that event, that future consideration would include review of issues and complaints arising during past events. In addition, various conditions have been applied related to noise management, and the noise regulations require preparation and approval and implementation of event-specific noise management plans, consistent with other large venues and large events across the city. In relation to some of those other events, it's my understanding that the events that are likely to occur in future are consistent with and similar to the types of events that have occurred over the last few years at that site, and are unlikely to cause any significant additional noise or disruption. There are a large number of management strategies and plans required in the conditions, and the nature of this proposal is such that there are a number of supporting technical strategies and plans that will need to be separately reviewed and approved for implementation. All of this adds up to quite a complex site that will require ongoing work to implement and to manage. It gives me comfort to note that Venues West will be the ongoing manager of the site operations, bringing their management experience to the site. Overall, I'm satisfied that the proposal remains consistent with the intent of its designation as regional open space and can be supported with the proposed conditions and advice notes recommended by officers.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Brooks. Commissioners, is there further comment before we move to amendments? No further comment. What I would suggest with amendments is that we deal with the amendments proposed that have been supported by the DPLH officers. So in dealing with that, the first would be a modification to amend advice note D, which is to make an amendment to part 2 to read existing vegetation to be retained and protected, the depth and width of structural root zones and details of tree protection zones. Also part 4, location, species and quantity of all proposed plantings, including expected canopy coverage at maturity. And part 8, existing vegetation to be removed, including the number of trees, their location, age, species, sizes and canopy coverage, including total canopy. And for an amendment to advice note H to add the following, number 17, bump in and bump out requirements and timeframes for major and minor events. If I could please request a mover and seconder for those amendments. It's moved by Commissioner Shears and seconded by Commissioner Sandry. Is there any discussion? Any dissent? Thank you, those amendments are carried. Members, are there any other modifications, amendments that Commissioners wish to move? Yes. Commissioner Adair.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move a modification to condition 17. At the moment it reads rather in an ambiguous way to me, so I would like to move that it be reworded to motorsports events are limited to one supercar event per year for a maximum of 3 days, excluding bump in, bump out periods, being during daylight hours, Friday to Sunday. Would you like me to read that again?
Yes, please.
So motorsport events are limited to one supercar event per year, and then the rest of it says per them.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Is there any discussion?
The reason I'm saying is I listened to the way it's explained and I understand the intent. I think that the wording at the moment could be used in other ways, or interpreted in another way. So I'm just trying to provide clarity that the actual motorsports events are limited to that one event.
Yes, Commissioner Brooks, do you wish to comment?
No, I'm agreeing with Commissioner Adair on that.
Commissioners? Officers, do you wish to make any, do you wish to provide any advice on the change?
We did attempt to draft, we did draft something in the background. On the back of the discussion, we drafted almost exactly the same wording.
Okay, thank you.
Great minds.
And to your knowledge, do you believe this would be acceptable to the operations and to the applicant in terms of the intent of the proposal?
Yep, we're comfortable.
Confident? Okay, thank you. Members, is there any further discussion on the amendment? Is there any dissent? Thank you, that is carried. Are there any further amendments? I might make some comments. I think one of the things that has come up that I would like to address, in addition to the comments that have already been made, first of all, I would like to say that this proposal generally has been of high public interest, and I think it was useful today to understand that aside from the consultation that's been specific for the part of the proposal that we're dealing with today under the MRS, that was conducted over a 21-day period with a minimum of 14 days required, that there has been other more comprehensive engagement undertaken by the state government generally on the whole of the proposal. And I think that was useful to understand more from the applicant team and also from the officers on that matter. I would like to talk to the issues of orderly and proper planning because that has been raised through deputation submissions. It has been quite a focal point, and I think that there's two things. There's the purpose of the regional open space reservation, which has been spoken about quite significantly today, but just to put my views on that, I do believe that this proposal is consistent with that purpose, given that we are going to be seeing here furthering of recreational, cultural and entertainment use, enhanced public access, including pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, and improved canopy outcomes. So I do see that strong alignment. I do think that in considering orderly and proper planning principles, there has been a lot of talk about the complexities of the land tenure arrangements, but I don't think that that should be confused with the lack of orderly and proper planning in accordance with the role of the Commission under the Metropolitan Region Scheme. The proposal demonstrates alignment with the planning framework as well as key planning considerations. I point to Perth and Peel at 3.5 million frameworks, which identify Burswood as a district centre with a specialised tourism and entertainment role, providing important economic and employment activity. I'd point to the Burswood Peninsula District Structure Plan, which whilst we've discussed is non-statutory, it does guide development in the precinct, and it has been prepared by the WAPC and endorsed. And under the DSP, the stadium precinct has been identified as a sporting zone, and the majority of the Perth Park area is within a future urban and public purpose use as well as the sporting zone, and I think that that is very important, that the DA area is sitting with, in particular, is sitting within the sporting zone. The site is located adjacent to the Optus Stadium precinct and its landscape context, and the site shares Lot 2001 with Optus Stadium, which also sits within the regional open space reservation. The management order to venues west over Lot 2001 includes the site and identifies the lot for multi-use stadium, sports, recreation and entertainment precinct. And the Town of Victoria local planning strategy identifies the wider Perth Park site as a specialised activity centre, in brackets proposed, and open space. And I believe that Perth Park is included in Neighbourhood 1 Burswood Peninsula with the objectives to develop a regional destination with a mix of world-class visitor activities, experiences and accommodation. This area has long been recognised as a regional destination for sporting, recreation and entertainment facilities in what is a heavily engineered and human-made environment, with the site having a history of landfill and is unsuitable for sensitive development such as housing on this particular site. The precinct also has significant public and active transport, with a focus on rail and buses supported by pedestrian and cycling access. And this precinct has been planned to accommodate the highest order of events in our metropolitan area and crowd movements, and to minimise car dependency. However, I would note that whilst we're seeing a decrease in parking, we are seeing that uplift in ACROD parking, which is important for enhanced access for people with a disability. Cultural heritage has been mentioned in terms of Aboriginal heritage and the Aboriginal Advisory Group, which will be advising OMTID as they take this project forward. But I think it's also worth mentioning that the old Burswood Canal was also considered, which is an important part of Western Australia's transport history, and the Heritage Council is satisfied that there is no impact. Environmental matters have been discussed at length today. I would point to the EPA determination that the Perth Park proposal did not require assessment, and a number of the conditions have been informed by the officer's consultation with DUA and DBCA, and DBCA has also provided advice around ensuring that canopy and planting is native, and that has been accommodated in the landscape plan. We are seeing that uplift in canopy across the site, and whilst that doesn't reach the desire of many of the submitters, I think that is important to note, that moving from 4 to 12% will be a substantial improvement. I do just want to quickly point to some of the conditions that are there to address the noise issues, which I do see as the key issue that has really been fundamental to the consideration. Condition 14 talks to the noise management plan. We've talked about the separate approvals that will be quite required by DUA under the noise regulations for activities under that, and that there will be periodic noise management strategy reviews, and that an updated acoustic report is required under condition 16, which must be peer reviewed by an acoustic specialist prior to commencement of operations. We have discussed the motorsport being the primary impact, and I believe that has been managed accordingly to get the right balance in allowing this precinct to develop in the intent and desire that is intended under the planning framework. I also think it's really beneficial to understand that Venues West, who are very well practiced in running Optus Stadium, will take a holistic view of the operations across the Perth Park precinct, as well as their existing management of the stadium, making sure that the management of large-scale events across both of those elements will be managed. So that's given me great confidence to understand that too. Members, do you wish to make any further comments on the application? Okay, well, we'll move the application. Is there any dissent? There is no dissent, therefore the application is approved. Thank you very much. Members, that concludes our business for today. So I'd like to thank everybody for your attendance at the meeting today, in person and online. I'd like to thank the deputies, the applicant team and the officers. Gary, thank you in particular for the comprehensive report that you've provided in consultation with the team and the support provided by you all. So I'll close the meeting at 4:20 p.m. Thank you.